All right, let's try this again. Hello, world. I made it. Hopefully you make it. Let's see, though. Usually I don't get pushed by big corpo for, literally no reason. Not anyone's fault. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of weird that to be forced into such a position that the only outlet, only thing close to a proper outlet that I'm allowed is through the corporations that I detest and despise for reasons both public and private, such as Google, Amazon, all the things. But if I had to pick a corporate daddy, I'd have to fucking pick Google. If I had to pick a corporate overlord, I would co-sign on Google. Because they got rid of the whole "don't be evil" thing, so they're an honest company. You got to respect that. They were like, yeah, we're gonna do evil. They were like, well, don't do evil. They were like, well, that's hard, so let's get rid of that. But I don't know. I don't actually hate Google. I just know for sure that one of their former employees ripped off my idea back in 2006, and I don't know. Google does a lot of good things. If you've ever checked out like the Google Library, the Google Google Scholars and stuff like that, it was fucking wonderful. And then you got Google Earth, and the problem is to make, and then it's not really a problem because they pay people well. So shut up, Brandon. You're way out of your element. But it's the idea of authoritarianism and monopolistic ownership. Fuck you. But also the individual might be, mostly an illusion. Well, I mean, we're having fun though, I just dropped in to see what condition my condition was in. So, I don't know. I'm going to keep this running for like maybe 5 minutes total or more or wherever. I don't care. Or if people join me in the discussion. It's hard to discuss things when I'm always fucking right. Like, where's the discussion to be had in corporations are evil? It's like, yeah, but we know. Fucking, what are we gonna do about it? Therein lies the problem, my friend. How do you deal with that? I don't know. Why do we just allow? I don't know. Oh, yeah, this part. Bye. Yeah, let's go. I'm gonna leave this running for like 5 minutes. See if anybody wants to talk about anything. See if that lunatic who was inviting me onto his stream jumps on my stream so we can actually get a discussion going. Because he didn't mean it when he said he wanted me on his stream. Because he wouldn't drop the link. Every other time he's on live, he's like, if anybody wants to join the stream, here's the StreamYard link. But then all during that process, no StreamYard link. And he's like, I'm against the corporations. Hop on this Zoom call with me. Sponsored by Microsoft. Which is stupid because, this video is sponsored by Google and YouTube. And I got a lot to say about big tech, about monopolization, about the utilization of people's data, about AI, about stealing content, about destroying the planet. There's so much, there's a lot there. A lot there to be mad about. They want to make you feel crazy and unreasonable for being upset about real fucking problems. Real problems that have very simple solutions, which is we educate an independent society of individuals, capable and intelligent individuals who have access to the same resources, who have access to the same health care, who are guaranteed housing, thereby eliminating most stressors that cause people to act weird. How you do that? That's the thing is, a bunch of guys, they were like, hey, we're sick of you guys are doing stuff over here, so we're going to go over there. But then there was already people there, and they're like, well, if we just get rid of them real fast, nobody will even know that they were ever here in the first place. And that didn't work. They were like, fuck, they're humans, man. They're learning our language. God damn it. Here, get this little reservation of shitty land and we'll build around it. All right, that's now. You can have this. Leave us alone. What? We were here first. And man, they were doing things way better. More sustainably, less harmful. Provably. I just watched, you know what? I'll watch it again. I'm going to queue it up before I switch over, though, because... So, yeah. Yep. And I don't... again, here's another 10 out of 10 content creator who really... Now, I just want to point out that I had beef with Joe Rogan since before I was a comedian. I've always had beef with Joe Rogan. And I've had beef with Joe Rogan since before his podcast, but it just deepens and gets worse and worse. All right. So today we're going to watch DarkMatter2525 and his video essay about Joe Rogan. Oh, the video. Oh, no. Okay. All right. Let's rock. So today we're going to watch DarkMatter2525's video essay about Joe Rogan, well, mostly about climate change and how Joe Rogan doesn't understand climate change, titled Ignorance Disguised as Knowledge.
But you do think that human beings were created by God?
I do, yeah.
When do you think that happened?
When? Oh, probably, and not that long ago.
Really?
No, not really.
Like, what do you mean by not that long ago?
Probably only about 8,000 years ago.
Really?
Yeah.
This video will lead you down a rabbit hole that is going to get very dark and I'm sorry about that. But it's necessary in order to be honest. It started when I saw a YouTube short of Mel Gibson denying evolution on Joe Rogan's podcast, and I immediately wanted to respond to it, so I hunted down the episode and watched the whole thing and went a bit numb in the process. They said a lot of very wrong things I could have responded to, but what really struck me was Joe Rogan's climate change denial. It was more impactful and more politically influential currently, and thus more harmful than Mel Gibson's goofy, lazy creationism, which he doesn't push nearly as enthusiastically as Rogan's climate denial. So I was very much inspired to address Joe Rogan instead. He confidently and recklessly speaks about this important topic that he clearly doesn't know much about, but he's
clearly doesn't know much about, but pretends to. And it's because he's a delusional idiot who convinces himself of these things that, and you're like, oh, he's not delusional, he has experts on all the time. Does he, though?
Watched by millions of people who just listen and believe. And not only is that frustrating, but to explain
Actually, let me real quick check on the title here. Let me let's see if we can update this, and let me make sure that all the sounds are working as they should be. Because as we know, I can go an hour and a half without realizing there's no freaking sound. All right, I found myself. All right, make sure we can hear Kratos talking. Against the... Oh, no. Here we go.
It started when I saw you.
Oh, yeah, we're all good, bud. We're cooking with fire here. Oh, fuck yeah, bud.
Exactly why Joe is wrong requires resources that were the products of very hard work, decades of advanced education and research from extremely intelligent people, and that's why falsehoods will always spread far more quickly than the truth. Falsehoods are very easy and reckless. You only have to utter them, which can take mere seconds. But the
right. Facts. The truth must be verified. Lies must never be verified.
Truth takes time, humility, discipline, ability, and respect. On the off chance that Joe Rogan ever sees this, if I could speak to him directly, I would say this.
For the record, me being from Woonsocket, Rhode Island, Joe Rogan being from Worcester, and Bill Burr being from Southie or ish, Boston, it is in fact true that I used to sell both of them drugs, and inferior drugs at that, just to follow in the steps of the great consumer variety store, CVS.
As a former devout...
Also, anybody who thinks Joe Rogan could kick my ass, I got another thing coming for you. He really it's all creatine, it's stuff, and he's angry, and yeah, he's got the training and stuff, sort of, kind of. But when's the last time Joe Rogan actually fought, huh? Also, I don't think all those muscles are gonna deflect,
martial artists myself who taught professionally to over 200 students. I know that you know what you're talking about when it comes to martial arts. I would consider you an expert in that subject. I know that understanding takes years to learn. If someone seriously told you that the best way to defend against a square house kick would be to block it with an arm bar, then you would immediately know that person has no idea what the hell they're talking about. Joe, that's how you sound when you wander into these scientific fields you know nothing about. Now, I know you said you did a lot of research, but imagine a guy walking in off the street and entering the octagon against Sean Strickland, and the guy says, don't worry, he did a lot of martial arts research, and he even has a gym at home where he works out 3 times a week, and even though he's never done any sparring, he has watched a lot of fights. So already we know he has probably done more martial arts training than you've done climate science. Despite that, you and I both know that guy is about to get his ass kicked. Don't be that guy when it comes.
I want to be that guy sometime. Maybe Joe Rogan would rock my shit, but give me the fair one before that decision's made.
To topics outside your.
But also, without a referee, because I don't know the rules. I don't intend on following them.
Area of expertise. Respect the knowledge of the people who are pro fighters in their fields. When you talk to a guy like Mel Gibson, keep the discussion within the realm of directing movies. Mel Gibson knows what he's talking about when it comes to directing a movie. He doesn't know anything about evolution, climate change, or even religious history. You have a responsibility to not be so damn reckless with the claims you and your guests present to millions of people.
Yeah, Mel Gibson has proven to be one who holds strange ideas. Why would you offer him any validity?
And you look dangerously foolish to people who know better.
Radiocarbon dating and detecting carbon isotopes. It's like, that's pretty legit.
Pretty legit, bro.
I don't know. I can't square it.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to.
And I don't have to. And
Yeah.
What difference is it going to make to me?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's
He goes ahead and says, what difference is it going to make to me? And then goes and denies climate change, which is currently, as will be addressed, making a world of difference in everyone's life.
it doesn't make a difference in terms of your experience in this life on Earth.
No.
Like you can have your faith and your ideas and live a great life from beginning to end, and it might not suit you to really ponder evolution and all the puzzles and problems.
No. It doesn't. You know.
Yeah.
And I just
Yeah, because, curiosity is a sign of intelligence, and why would I want to put those kind of signs up? I just want warning signs. I just want stay away warning signs. I don't want no signs going up to say that I'm an intelligent person because I'm curious to know things. That's crazy.
I look at all sorts of stuff like that, like, the icebergs melting and the water overflowing.
It's not.
Ever have a glass full of ice and watched it melt? Did you ever see the glass flow over?
No.
It takes up less room,
Now, see, this is where I admire DarkMatter2525. This right here, what's about to happen, what's about to transpire, is 100% where I lack. Because instead, this is where I tune out. This is where I walk away. This is where I'm like, okay, I don't. This is a waste of my time. This is a waste of my brain sponge. This is silliness. This is goofy. But DarkMatter2525 has the wherewithal to tolerate this nonsense and refute it. Now, have I put time at all, thought at all into refuting this stuff? No, because in my mind it doesn't need refutation. In my mind, the reality wins. But my mind, where reality wins, is absolutely a whole delusion. Because as we can see, these delusional idiots are absolutely in power and making decisions for all of us.
Yeah.
You know, the hot greenhouse, whatever.
Before I address their ignorant climate change arguments, I want you to notice their mentality towards scientific understanding and how they think it doesn't really make a difference in their lives if they don't believe it. Now, at first they're talking about evolution, and they disagree. Joe Rogan pushes back ever so gently because he understands that evolution happened, but he also clearly doesn't care enough to rock the boat with Mel Gibson. In the end, they conclude it doesn't affect their lives no matter what they believe about it, and Mel Gibson...
Mel Gibson, he's a get, he's a draw. You're gonna pull in view. You know, you can't push back on somebody that draws attention. You can't make them fucking think about the things that they say at all.
Gibson even applies that sentiment to climate change, which causes them to segue into their lockstep agreement that climate change is no big deal and is not being caused by human beings if it's even happening at all. What's vital to understand is their rejection of that science absolutely made a massive difference, especially as very influential people. For instance, without Joe Rogan's endorsement, it's debatable whether Trump could have won the last election, and the effects of Trump's policies are absolutely...
That he immediately walked back and tries to act like he's not accountable for endorsing Trump at all. Or, come on, don't be a pussy. Don't be a fucking bitch-ass pussy, Joe Rogan. How is Joe Rogan such a bitch-ass pussy that he walks back like he was never there in the first place? Coward.
Absolutely disastrous for the environment in a multitude of ways, including climate change. And Joe's attitude toward beliefs about evolution not mattering sort of speaks to how he can justify his denial about climate change. He's sort of partially correct about it not mattering to him, because he has more insulation from the consequences due to the enormity of his wealth.
Right, it's the oil barons and the Joe Rogans, you know, the mouthpieces for the machine. It's the machine. It's the Bezoses and the Musks that are gonna, if it becomes clear that human extinction is inevitable, they have at least enough resources to try to fuck off to a different planet or to the moon. But what they don't understand is that they can't make it work here. They're even worse off if they... So, I don't know. Because I'm convinced that their plan is to just destroy everything and fuck off. But I don't think that's because they're convinced. And they don't realize there's nowhere to fuck off to, man.
That's not really the case for us, though. He can afford to take measures that will protect himself, at least temporarily. So yeah, Joe Rogan and Mel Gibson have already lived most of their lives during the time of abundance, and they have great wealth, so they get to live in a state of denial, and it's no big deal to them if they're wrong. They get to have that luxury as
exactly. They're cushioned from the consequences.
Their lives come to a close. They get to scoff in comfort because of their position in time and wealth. Future human beings, enduring blackouts, climate migrations, resource wars, etc., will not have that luxury. The luxury of multimillionaires carelessly and ignorantly pontificating in a comfortable studio, never having to worry about the nightmare world that's coming.
Literally the worst thing, and I hate to say this on the machine, you know, but the worst thing for them that we could do is drop out. Just stop using their shit. Oh, but we need it. Oh, my God, stay in touch with my kids. Oh, I don't know my kids are safe. They can't call me 24/7. Oh, yeah, you spend time with them. You talk to your kids, you know. But my uncle, he had to move all the way to Idaho for a job. Now he's a racist, and it's not his fault, you know. But how are we going to stay in touch with my uncle in Idaho if it wasn't for Starlink, you know? Well, there's the thing about that. He's probably doing it. All right. Sorry. This takes the ability to step back from everything you are enthralled in, which everyone does not have the ability to step back and look at everything the way that it is. Most jobs are unnecessary. A lot of industry was based on a religious faith that all will be provided and go forth and multiply, and then it's so we're trying to sustain, which it's not impossible, but under the current structure of what we got going on, and yes, okay, we're not stuck this way. There are a lot of things going on that are changing the way society and people look at things and understand the world that we share. It might be happening. I don't know. Nobody knows that. Even the smartest people in the world cannot accurately 100% predict the future. It's one of our deficits. It's one of our flaws. I'm sorry that even if we work together, we measure all the atoms in the universe in their direction, we cannot entirely fully predict what will happen when. But with that said, we can affect the world in front of us. All of us, every single person on this planet can affect what is directly. Well, no, not every single, because okay, so that's ableism. That's discounting, right? So then that adds to it. So yes, we have to do like 133% of the work to pick up for other people who are unable to care for themselves and provide for themselves. I agree with that. Nobody should go without. All right, maybe I am adding transformative information and personalization to the video. I don't know, but I don't think he's going to be that type of dude. Let's hear him talk some more.
Mel Gibson stays largely quiet during their talk on climate change, but let's address his initial point comparing melting icebergs to melting ice cubes in a glass of water, which obviously doesn't cause the glass to overflow, just like he said. And of course, Joe didn't see a problem with that analogy because he doesn't know what he's talking about either. See, the problem with that analogy is that 99% of Earth's ice is currently on land in the form of enormous glaciers. 8% of ice is on Greenland, and 91% of it is on Antarctica. Not in the water. When chunks of ice break off of those melting glaciers, those chunks fall into the water, and we call those icebergs. That's adding ice cubes into your glass smell, which will cause it to overflow. Those icebergs and glaciers weren't always there. 60 million years ago, there wasn't any year-round ice on Earth at all, and there was much more water because of it. Swampland stretched inland very far, and that was a time in which much of the climate on Earth was practically uninhabitable for human beings. Back when there was much more ice, like back during the last glacial maximum 20,000 years ago, back when ice covered 8% of the Earth's surface, the global sea level was over 400 feet lower than it is today, and human beings were around to see it. Furthermore, sea level rise has already accelerated. Sea level rise isn't uniform across the entire Earth, but over the last 100 years, the sea level rose by an average of about 10 inches. Now, during the decade between 2013 and 2022, that rate doubled. So you may say, what's the big deal? That's
exponents now.
20 inches over the next 100 years, right? Well, the problem is the albedo effect. The more the ice melts, the less sunlight is refracted by the ice, thus causing even more ice to melt. It's a feedback loop, so the rate of sea level rise won't stay consistent, just like it's accelerating now. It'll keep growing as the Earth warms. The Earth has lost 39 trillion tons of ice since I graduated high school back in the early 90s. The world has changed in a very meaningful way just during my lifetime alone. Rapidly changing an environment is not good for the species that evolved to.
Also, you know what? Forget me. DarkMatter2525 would probably take it to Joe Rogan. That ain't a small dude. This guy, he could probably eat me alive. My options, I would have to I'd have to Muhammad Ali him. I'd have to sting him up and back off, and sting him up and back off fast enough that he can't do nothing. But how long could I keep that up? Because all he has to do in that situation is stand still and wait for me to get tired, and then he wins. To
live in that environment. Now, this graph shows how high tide flooding has changed since the 1950s. So it is having a real effect on people and will only continue to get worse. And that doesn't even account for the more frequent and more devastating weather patterns caused by warmer water.
Well, there's a lot of horseshit that's involved in climate change for sure. I've studied that, and I've had many discussions over the last 4 years. The problem with anything is that once a narrative gets established, and then there's a profit attached to the solution to that narrative.
Yes.
And that's green energy and green.
Remember, guys, both of these men are capitalists, love profits. These are the men who will argue that profits are necessary and a motivating factor to get anyone to do anything at all. Oh, nobody would clean out the poop or throw out the garbage if everyone had what they needed. That's Joe Rogan, right? That's what he thinks. He thinks that the communism's bad and that capitalism's good. He loves profits, but now here he is. He's like, oh, yeah, a profit motive. Profit motive just devalues the whole idea of climate change. The fact that anyone would try to make a living off of fixing the human behaviors so that we can live on this fucking planet a little bit longer. That's bullshit. But the guy who's making money trying to sell me gasoline and creatine, that guy's, he's legit, deserves every fucking red cent. Yeah, these people, they make no sense. They're inconsistent.
Green energy.
Which I am too. I'm sure I have inconsistencies, but there's at least a pattern of growth in my ideology and understanding of the world. You can follow the evolution where you believe in this. You not believe it, but you know that science is real because you do science yourself at home. You get these science workbooks and you make batteries on your table, and then you see, wow, holy crap, that's the real stuff, Dad. Look at it go. It's really the potato. Turn the light on. And it's like, that's science, not magic. That's not God doing that. That's electrons doing it. God's pushing the electrons, stupid. What, you stupid? Yeah, I'd be so stupid to deny God, stupid. And I don't know, man. It's so, and then you go, no, it's not how God pushes the electrons. It's a lack of electrons that pulls them. You don't understand how electricity works, do you? Well, okay. Well, you think put the lack of electrons there in the first place? Fucking God, you stupid idiot. God damn it. And so you have those people who are convinced that everything's going to be fine no matter what. That they can't have any accountability for their actions because they're going to go off to a better place when they die and fuck whatever happens to anyone that's left here.
Bills, and then there's businesses that are wrapped around there, and then there's also this fear that they love to pump into people about climate change, that they terrify the shit out of young people that we're going to destroy.
Oh, hold on, I actually have to change the settings before YouTube is comfortable. I forget that I have to do this sometimes. Yeah, you gotta set that as not made for kids so they know who to push it for. Imagine if Carl Panzram and Ken Kniff from Connecticut had a conversation, or not necessarily Carl Panzram, but the guy from that movie that's supposed to be him.
destroy the world and climate change, you must act now, and then you become beholden to the political party that is espousing these ideas, and then your enemy is the deniers of this science, even though you don't even understand the science.
Yeah.
Get him, DarkMatter2525. Get him.
Joe is correct, but in the perfect opposite direction. The big money and influence is in oil. I mean, just look at how dramatically the war in Iran and cutting off the transport of oil through the Strait of Hormuz affected the global economy. It would have been significantly worse if China hadn't stopped its oil imports, which they were able to do because they have enormous oil reserves, more than every other country combined. There's a lot of speculation about
China looking out for the whole planet.
Why they did that, but it did greatly mitigate harm that would have been done to the global economy because of oil disruption. So there's always a much greater influence to keep the oil flowing no matter what, and that includes disseminating climate change denial propaganda to discredit scientific facts. When you look at the history of the oil industry, you find massive levels of corrupt involvement with the government. The oil industry tried to honestly, scientifically debunk anthropogenic.
Now, I do honestly believe that DarkMatter2525 will not copyright claim my video, but I will say right now, I don't think I'll be pausing this. I'm going to let the man talk for a good while, and because but then I'm going, when I have something to say, I'm going to stop it and say it, and hopefully contribute to whichever. I mean, it's a kind of obvious whose side I'm on in this discussion here. Well, it's not really. It's two monologues. Well, it's one discussion turned in. Anyway, life is weird. Communication is weird. But this man, he's onto something, and we got to pay attention. So I'm going to let him talk so that I'm going to try to interrupt very little for like up to here-ish. Okay?
Climate change back in the 1970s. So they hired scientists to study it and disprove it. And what happened was that their own scientists actually proved that it is happening. And their predictions since then have been extremely accurate. And the reason most people don't know that is because oil companies kept the findings confidential until it was leaked against their will, and instead created massive public campaigns to deny and discredit the science. You've probably seen some of their propaganda and concluded that the scientists have been wrong and their predictions have been bad and that there isn't even a consensus. But none of that is true. At this point, Joe Rogan isn't even talking about the science yet. He's talking about motives. Now, I've already talked about that in a video I made back at the end of 2024. It's called Why Some Deaths Are Celebrated. Let me play you a 4-minute segment from the relevant portion of that video. The people who lied to you and told you that it isn't happening were some of the first people to discover that it is happening. That's how egregious their lies were. They knew it was a problem long before most of us did. They knew what they were doing, but did it anyway, and then told you that what they were doing wasn't a problem. Citizens United versus the Federal Elections Commission was a 5-4 Supreme Court decision in 2010, which made it so that any corporation or nonprofit organization could spend as much money as they wanted on any political campaign, and it could be dark money, meaning that they didn't have to report it. This is, of course, how your government is bought. Incidentally, insurance company PACs donated $23 billion to candidates in 2024. What's interesting is that before this decision was made, there was actual bipartisan debate on climate change. But after that decision, the climate change debate became divided sharply along political lines. Facts don't care about your politics. They're true regardless of who you vote for.
All right. We almost made it about halfway. I'm going to say something here. Politics is matters of the public in my understanding of the word, and then you get into politicians who are managers of the matters of the public. In my opinion of the word is my understanding of the word. So I don't think we. I think either we need no politicians or that everyone is a politician is what needs to happen. Is we either all work for the public good, or there is no public good, and like we need to do it. Stop worrying about jobs and houses and banks and bills. Like cut that out. Stop it. Everyone, who cares? Get evicted. How many people do you think are going to be outside before these banks and jobs and everything shut down? Because there's no movement, there's no motion, and then now everything's free again the way it's supposed to be. Oh, but then you got the strong taking advantage of the weak, and there's no organization, and you need that. Okay, well, in my experience, bad things happen, right? And not when you expect it, But okay, listen. If everyone stopped driving cars, there'd be no car accidents. Okay, and that you understand that. Okay, so like if nobody pays rent, then there is no rentals. There's no rent. There's no the idea is eliminated. Do you understand? So if we stop using money and start building together and providing for each other without fear, and if we all study and have access to the same resources, information, the protectors will protect. They'll all of us will be capable of protecting each other in ways, and then the motivating factors for people to do harm to one another, outside of actual brain injury and there's a lot of stuff that needs to be considered, but these factors become more identifiable when you take the factor of need out, because people usually steal when they need it. Not always. There's people who steal, or there's people who steal because they want attention or something like that. There's plenty of people who have everything they need and still steal anyway but that's where we get into we can weed. Well, not weed them out, but we can hone in on why the people are doing the problem. Because the people who steal for like the dopamine, they'll get immediately identified, because the people who steal because they don't need anything anymore. You understand? So like the people who do harm to others physically, right? The ones who do it to defend people, and the ones who do it to offend people or because they believe some crazy nonsense, it'd be easier to filter out who's who and why is why. In my opinion, no? Does that not make sense? Maybe I am a crazy person.
But the debate curiously changed after 2010. This is also around the time that a lot of propaganda.
That's why I stabbed that guy.
Campaigns around climate change started, usually promoted by politicians. But politicians aren't scientists. The media isn't science either. Never confuse a politician's lie or a media headline as actual.
And that's where I mucked up, is for a while there, I was an anti-vax person. I was against vaccines because they had organized it back then, at this time, in such a way that it seemed like science. And they do that.
Scientific data. One of the more popular pieces of propaganda is that scientists are paid a lot of money to skew the science, and that the moneyed interests are in favor of green energy. This is the same tactic as a pedo who accuses everyone else of being pedos. It diverts attention because it makes it look like they care about the crime while being guilty of it. Look at what happened after the Citizens United Supreme Court decision. Oil and gas expenditures to Republican campaigns skyrocketed, and just enough money was given to Democrats to make them ineffective opposition. They started giving a hell of a lot of money away. So, what were they getting in return? Hundreds of billions of dollars in subsidies. Their investment paid off quite well for them. Not only do they make record profits, but they get tons of your tax dollars because the corporations and the government are working together like the mob. If you don't play ball, then they fund your political opponent and get them in office. Slip the people in control of the money some cash, and even line the government with your executives, and in return they deregulate and send you tons of subsidies that result in billions of dollars, which causes a market advantage that is about as far as you can get from free market capitalism as you could possibly imagine. Yet they want you to believe that anyone who is resistant to this corruption is somehow a hardcore communist, un-American, or anti-business. It's ridiculous Red Scare tactics. The moneyed interest is...
Yeah, so this is stuff that he understands and articulates much better than I do, because this is where, in my opinion, things get fucky, and I just walk away. I don't deal with people like that. I don't
is in the oil.
I don't want nothing to do with it.
Industry. Whatever argument you make against green energy regarding profit motive, you have to apply to the oil industry times 1,000 at least. And I strongly suspect that this line of reasoning is pure projection from Joe, because he has sold out for money in the most shameless sort of way. Ever since he's accepted all these highly lucrative deals, he's done a complete 180 on a lot of the things he used to support and a lot of the things he used to condemn, becoming practically the polar opposite of himself before he was pulling in hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And did you see the Washington Post article that they published recently about temperature change on Earth?
No.
Well, there's a like what they've realized is over the last, X amount of thousands of years that the temperature on Earth is plummeting.
Yeah.
And it's dropping. And then when they look at the dips, this is the most important
Me looking at the dips.
thing for anybody that's really freaked out about climate change. There's no static temperature of Earth ever. Mm-hmm. There's never been a time where it maintains a temperature until human beings came along and fucked it all up. Mm-hmm. That is just not real. Mm-hmm. Before human beings ever existed, if you trust these core samples, there's been a giant rise and fall and this constant dip.
Yeah,
there it is.
Yeah.
All right, again, DarkMatter2525 is about to go in on him in a more articulate way than I could.
Scientists have captured Earth's climate over the last 485 million years. Here's a surprising place we stand now. Look at the dip at the end.
Whoa.
That's
I'm looking at the dip. You are the dip, Joe Rogan.
Where we are.
Yeah,
that's reality.
Okay.
And then if you look at the course of history, you look at the rise and fall, like it's never a straight line. Way before human beings ever existed, if you believe these silly people. Way before human beings had ever existed. There's always this rise and fall. And this idea that the whole thing is based on carbon emissions from human beings is total bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Joe is essentially making 3 points here. 1, climate change isn't a big deal because it has happened all throughout Earth's history. 2, the Earth is actually cooling. And 3, climate change occurred many times long before human beings existed, so it's likely that any current change is just natural and that we aren't having a major impact. Let's take these foolish beliefs apart, shall we? Joe presents this graph as if it's some sort of expose.
While he speaks, I am going to do a thing.
That debunks the climate scientists as if they were keeping it a big secret, or even that they didn't know that climate has greatly fluctuated throughout the past and that it's cooler than it once was, not hotter. But the reason climate scientists know that climate change is happening is caused by humans, and is a huge problem is specifically because of the information in graphs like that. First, that article that Joe cited is an article about how human beings are causing climate change. Yet the beginning and end of Joe's assessment about it is that graph, which he doesn't understand. He's citing an article that supports anthropogenic climate change and claiming that the article disproves it. See, the article cites this scientific study, which concludes that carbon dioxide is the dominant driver of the climate change throughout the last 500 million years. But why does that matter? After all, it's like Joe said, the Earth's temperature has fluctuated wildly throughout its history, and it's true that it has been much hotter than it is today, while still supporting life. But there's a couple of really big problems with that way of thinking. First of all, we didn't evolve during those times, and neither did the ecosystem that supports us. We didn't adapt to exist during those eras of extreme heat and humidity. In fact, we evolved entirely within an ice age called the Quaternary Ice Age, which started 2.5 million years ago. It's ongoing. Did you know that? We're in an ice age right now. This is what it's like. The reason it doesn't look the way we would think an ice age looks is because we're currently in what's called an interglacial period, a warming change called the Holocene epoch that began about
We are in the middle of an ice age right now.
12,000 years ago. Now, for some people, that sounds like a smoking gun. If warming began 12,000 years ago, long before the Industrial Revolution, then doesn't that prove that our current climate change is not man-made and that warming is just natural? No, absolutely not. And I'll show you exactly why. But to get us there, let's first address the graph that Joe doesn't understand. See, the graph that Joe thinks is the smoking gun spans hundreds of millions of years. Now, for much of the time on that graph, a lot of the Earth would have been practically uninhabitable for humans and our ecosystem. So rapidly heading back in that direction is very bad for us. We're not equipped to handle the greenhouse world of the dinosaurs. Back then, there was no permanent ice anywhere, and a lot of the world was like a sauna. Without even considering the problem of losing our ecosystem, you yourself can survive in a sauna for short periods, but if you try to stay in one, you'll die. Sweat is supposed to cool you off, but if the surrounding air is too hot and humid for the sweat to evaporate, then your core temperature will rise. You'll dehydrate. Your organs will fail. You'll die. So if we made a time machine and you wanted to go back and see the dinosaurs, you could die in a very uneventful way while just walking around long before a T-Rex could get you, which would make for a pretty boring movie. It's also why Jurassic Park can't happen, at least not with the large dinosaurs.
Wait, what? What? Are you... Jurassic Park can't happen? What are you talking about?
Because they evolved to live in a sauna world, not our Ice Age world. So if you wanted to go back to the Cretaceous period when the T-Rex lived, you'd have to find a high latitude, high altitude place which would have a bit of seasonal cold, but most of the world would be totally off limits to you, even if there were no dinosaurs to worry about. And that's not a world that we want to rapidly bring back. After the mass extinction of the late Triassic, life had millions of years to adapt and repopulate a much warmer Earth, giving rise to the dinosaurs. The rate at which we're causing a similar warming change is not millions of years, it's decades. In other words, neither we nor our ecosystem has time to adapt and evolve. We'll just go extinct. Joe pushes back against Mel Gibson's creationism because Joe understands that evolution happened. But that's as far as his thinking goes. He doesn't understand the implications and limitations of evolution, which is why he doesn't see a threat when he looks at this graph. So when Joe looks at this graph and thinks we have plenty of room, he is not factoring in the fact that all 6 of Earth's mass extinction events occur on this graph and largely happened because of these wild swings in the temperature and the events that caused them. Most of them happen during these parabolic changes, like the one that's happening right now. Let's go through when they happened on this graph. The first one was here. It happened because the Earth
How to understand line graphs 101.
rapidly froze and then rapidly thawed. That wiped out 85% of all species. And by rapidly, I mean on a geological scale. But as you can see, it took millions of years, whereas our current change is happening in decades. That's a big problem. The second one is here, and it wiped out 70% of everything. This one was caused by the evolution of land plants, which sucked the CO2 out of the Earth's atmosphere, causing the temperature to plummet, the opposite of our current problem. Notice that it plummeted to about where we are now, yet it still wiped out 70% of the Earth, because those organisms did not evolve to live where we are now, just as we did not evolve to live where they were before they went extinct. That cold caused glaciation and sea level drop. As those plants died, massive amounts of their nutrients carried by rivers washed into the sea, causing massive algal blooms that reduced oxygen in the water, killing off ocean life.
Now, okay, see, pretty smart guy here. I don't know any of that. I don't know. Offhand, I would not be able to come up with this information. I know exactly what he's saying. I understand. But for me to be able to pull that, I mean, that's the thing, though, is he does research and makes high-quality videos. And I'm trying to learn from this man.
The third mass extinction,
As you should do,
is the largest of all, and it happened here, at this spike. That was global warming, and it wiped out 95% of life on Earth. That was due to huge volcanic eruptions where we now call Siberia. Those eruptions released massive amounts of CO2 into the atmosphere, thereby raising the Earth's temperature, which destabilized ecosystems. Only 5% of life was able to survive it, and that's what we're doing. We're destabilizing the ecosystem we rely upon, which is why air conditioning or moving to Alaska won't save us. This is when the fourth mass extinction happened. It doesn't look nearly as dramatic, but global warming was also a huge factor due to the release of greenhouse gases by volcanic activity caused by the breakup of the Pangea supercontinent. It messed up the oceans with acidification, stagnation, and anoxia, which is a lack of oxygen. Much of the ocean life was killed as a result. Ultimately, around 75% of the Earth's species were wiped out. This huge change resulted in 3 to 4 degrees Celsius of global warming, which was absolutely disastrous. To put that into perspective, human beings have already caused a 1.5 degrees Celsius increase. Now, I know that doesn't sound like a lot to us because of the local temperature differences we experience on a daily basis. But when we talk about the average of the entire Earth, think of it as something that's as sensitive as our own bodies. 37 degrees Celsius is the normal human body temperature. If your temperature goes up 3 or 4 degrees Celsius, that's death. That's a 41-degree fever. For my fellow Americans, that's a 106-degree fever. As it stands right now, we've given the Earth a
fellow American here,
101.3-degree fever, and it will only go up from here. If you were a parent with a child in that condition, you would immediately understand the severity. So, 200 million years
Yeah, kids going to the fucking hospital way before that, where they have the equipment to better understand what's causing and reduce harm from, and eventually eradicate said fever in most circumstances.
Years ago, that global warming extinction event paved the way for the rise of the dinosaurs, which evolved over millions of years of warming to be well suited for a hot world, and they thrived for many millions of years. Until the fifth mass extinction, which happened here, and it was also largely due to a temperature change, but that change was caused by a massive asteroid impact where we now call the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. That blocked out the sun for years and caused a lot of plants to die, which disrupted ecosystems and cooled the earth. And that also wiped out around 75% of all species, including most of the large animals, the non-avian dinosaurs, and paved the way for the rise of the mammals that eventually led to us.
Hey, that's me.
And this is the sixth mass extinction event, which is happening at this very moment, and is also coinciding with another dramatic temperature change. Our current mass extinction, called the Holocene extinction, is most relevant to us, so it deserves its own section of this video, and I'll elaborate on that one in a bit so that you more clearly understand the magnitude of what's actually going on right now. So a person ignorant of prehistory may look at this graph and think we have tons of room for the temperature to go up, but that's not the case. We don't have much room at all. Yes, the Earth can handle higher temperatures and humidity of a greenhouse effect, but we can't. And even if we could, many of the species we rely upon can't. We can afford a certain amount of variation where parts of the Earth are hotter, but the problem is when the global median keeps rising, which is what's happening now. That's why it's stupid when people get stuck in a blizzard and then make fun of the idea of global warming because of it, as if it were a global blizzard and as if a single event represents a trend. Regardless, one might look at this graph and see these massive swings since long before humans existed and conclude that our current swing is no different, and they also don't connect these massive swings to extinction events, so they see them as harmless and normal climate fluctuations. Someone might look at this graph and conclude that it's the exact opposite of what climate scientists say, and that we're actually cooling rather than heating. I mean, look at that plunge toward the present. Look at how far down we are. When Joe looks at that plunge, scoffs, and tells you not to worry, because he assumes we'd be fine if it went higher, he's displaying an extreme level of ignorance dressed up as an arrogantly presented gotcha, the epitome of the Dunning-Kruger effect. What you have to understand about this graph is that each of these ticks is 10 million years. You see that
10 million years.
That dramatic plummet at the end, and it seems rapid to us, just looking at a graph. But that plummet from top to bottom took 60 million years. We evolved specifically to live in the bottom of that plummet. That's our home. It's dangerous for us to leave there, and not just because we can't handle the temperature change. We can't handle the biodiversity loss that's going on right now because we rely on it. Our disregard for the web of life happened because we did not understand how fragile it is, that many species going extinct right now contributed to it in vital ways we did not comprehend and
did not and could currently easily comprehend and work together to fix.
Till it was too late. That same disregard might cause someone to look at this graph and think nothing of the little uptick at the end of it going parabolic. No big deal, right? It looks little compared to prehistoric levels. What's that about? How long did that uptick take? Well, human beings came onto the scene only around 200,000 years ago. And since each tick is 10 million years, we're
basically at the bottom of the drop here before it starts going up again is us.
basically right next to the zero here, where that uptick is. But even that spike is not the last 200,000 years. If we look at a graph of the Holocene epoch, the last 12,000 years, you can see what the temperature has been doing. And you'll notice a massive anomaly right at the end of it, which is our time today. It erases the last 6,000 years of cooling. So if we zoom in again to a 2,000-year timeline, we get an even clearer picture of when exactly this spike actually
That's so sad, man.
begins. It declines a bit after we start taking direct measurements, and then the spike begins around the start of the 20th century, when the effects of the Industrial Revolution start taking hold. That's the uptick on the graph that Joe doesn't even acknowledge because he doesn't understand the implications of that uptick that looks
Indeed, sir, that uptick is no joke at
so
all.
tiny and
At all.
insignificant on a geological scale of millions of years.
It's not true. We might be having an effect, but we're having a small effect, a very small effect. And the other things are completely outside of our control, including solar activity, the distance between
He thinks that humans populating the whole planet, the whole entire planet, are having a small, minor, little tiny effect.
the Earth and the Sun.
Mhm.
You know, there's a lot of factors. There's all sorts of factors involving natural activities
Which brings you to today's sponsor, Factor.
like
Just kidding, they don't fuck with me.
volcanic emissions, which devastate. The entire human race was knocked down to a few thousand people
Yeah.
at one point in time because of the Toba volcano.
Oh my God, yes.
This brings me back to that warming trend that started 12,000 years ago, thereby causing us to enter an interglacial period. Notice how that warming period naturally, gradually leveled out about 6,000 years ago. That is a fully expected pattern. You see, some people, including Joe Rogan, argue that the sun changes our climate over time naturally, and that contributes to what we're experiencing right now. He is absolutely correct that the sun changes our climate naturally over time. That's based on changes in the movement patterns of the Earth. Its eccentricity changes in Earth's orbital pattern, which is a 100,000-year cycle. Its obliquity changes in Earth's tilt, which is a 41,000-year cycle. And its axial precession changes in Earth's wobble, which is a 26,000-year cycle. Each of these cycles factors into how much the Earth absorbs the sun's energy over thousands of years. These long-term repeating cycles in the Earth's movement are what we call Milankovitch cycles, and they are very reliably predictable. Joe knows nothing about what these cycles mean for climate change. All he knows is that the sun affects our climate, so that's a variable scientists don't consider. He could not be more wrong. And there's a couple of reasons his argument is extremely bad. First of all, Milankovitch cycles take tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of years to very gradually change the Earth's temperature.
This is stuff that I don't know anything about. I have not studied. I have not come close to this type of science or knowledge.
But our own current warming is happening extremely rapidly, starting over the last 150 years and recently going parabolic. So on these graphs, Milankovitch cycles appear as very gradual hills and valleys, and not a sharp spike like our current change. But the main reason it's a really bad argument is because the Milankovitch cycles predict a long period of gradual cooling that's supposed to begin about 6,000 years ago. And that's exactly what started to happen. As you can see on the graph, a gradual decline starting 6,000 years ago, right in line with the Milankovitch cycles. But then there's this ridiculous incongruent spike coinciding with the Industrial Revolution that completely reverses the gradual cooling trend of the natural cycle we're supposed to be in right now. In other words, since the Industrial Revolution, we've completely erased 6,000 years of natural cooling from the Milankovitch cycle and broke the natural trend we're supposed to be in right now. So let's analogize this. Say you live your whole life experiencing very hot summers and very cold winters. But then, one year, it completely reverses, and it's a very cold summer with ice and snow, and a very hot winter with heat strokes and drought. That sudden change severely negatively affects vegetation and wildlife. Naturally, you're going to want to know why the hell it changed so dramatically. So you ask Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan scoffs at you and says the temperature has always just naturally changed with the seasons. Now, wouldn't that response seem pretty dumb to you? That's no different than the argument people are making when they blame it all on the sun or the Earth's natural cycle. Yes, the sun affects our climate, and yes, the Earth has a natural climate cycle, but that very cycle shows that the Earth is supposed to be doing the exact opposite of what the Earth is currently doing, which is not only extremely dangerous, but a clear sign that we're the ones who screwed it up. Because what's happening right now is quite unnatural. So yes, Joe knows the sun affects our climate, but mistakenly thinks it's evidence in his favor when it's actually evidence that goes directly against his argument, which is a theme with Joe. He thinks an article proves him right when it actually proves him wrong, and he thinks other variables support his argument when they actually hurt his argument. For instance, Joe mentioned volcanoes as yet another variable. He's great at listing variables, but he's not very good at looking into how those variables actually apply. So, could volcanoes be the cause of the change? Well, that's not a bad guess, because remember that when the Earth went through those prior mass extinction events, 2 of them, including the most major one, were caused by volcano-driven climate change that released massive amounts of CO2 into the atmosphere. So let's see if Joe is on to something. How do those prior periods of volcanic-driven climate change compare to the present? Currently, all the volcanoes on Earth combined produce anywhere from 130 million to 440 million metric tons of carbon dioxide per year. Mount St. Helens alone released about 10 million metric tons during its massive eruption in 1980. So, yes, modern volcanoes do send an awful lot of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And after all, volcanic emissions are the cause of the climate change that resulted in the Great Permian extinction and the Triassic extinction. That's true. Now, during an active year, it's even possible for all the Earth's volcanoes combined to release up to 500 million metric tons in a year. That's a lot, granted. But unfortunately for Joe's argument, and very unfortunately for us, per year, human beings release 40 billion metric tons of CO2 into the atmosphere, 2 orders of magnitude more than volcanoes. 500 million from every volcano combined in an active year compared to 40 billion from human beings every year. That's already the equivalent of setting off a Mount St. Helens every 2 hours. And it's just going to get worse with all the data centers going up. It's impossible for that.
Yep. It's only going to get worse.
That to not affect the atmosphere and the climate. There's people who think that we tiny human beings can't possibly affect the atmosphere of the entire planet. But try to envision how much we're pumping into the sky every year. It's hard to imagine because we think of gas as something that doesn't weigh much, if anything. But I'm talking about billions of tons of gas. Put that into perspective. MIT describes a ton of gas as being the size of a 27-foot cube, and 27 feet is about as tall as a telephone pole. So we're talking about a pretty big cube. Let me read you this paragraph from the MIT Climate Portal. It says 40 billion of those cubes, the amount of CO2 we pump out per year, would, quote, cover 1,045,911 square miles. This is enough to completely cover Alaska, Texas, and California, America's 3 largest states, to a depth of 27 feet. In the continental U.S., it would cover the entire Southwest, California, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas, with room to spare for nearby Wyoming, and that's just 1 year of the world's CO2 emissions, unquote. I describe it as launching 8 billion elephants into the sky every year. Imagine what that would look like. And the problem is that it's cumulative, because the Earth can't absorb all those emissions. So every year we just keep adding to what's already there. Earth absorbs about 40% of the CO2 we pump every year. That would mean 4.8 billion elephants stay in the sky, and every year 4.8 billion more elephants are added to the amount that stays in the sky. Imagine what that would look like after 50 years of your life, assuming it won't go even higher with all the data centers. There would be 240 billion elephants up in the sky. And rather than admitting it's a problem and doing something about it, we instead keep demanding more and more, not just for people now, but for AI as well. It's like we were already driving toward the cliff, and we already passed our last chance to stop, but now we're not even trying to hit the brake anymore. Instead, we're just flooring that gas pedal. And we're doing that specifically because we elevated people like Joe Rogan, and worse. Joe Rogan has no idea what he's talking about. He dismisses existential threats, and he effectively promoted and endorsed someone for the presidency who does the exact opposite of everything we should be doing right now. A species led not by the best and brightest, but by the worst and dumbest, the greediest and most corrupt, ironically, while espousing a meritocracy. And that's one reason we aren't going to last as a species. We're not like the crocodile or the shark or the turtle that have been around for eons and take only what they need when they need it. No, we're like that old saying, the candle that burns twice as bright lasts half as long. Only for us, it's way worse. We're a flash in the pan. Let me give you an example. Some people aren't worried about CO2 because it's good for plants, and plants are good for people. The atmosphere is 21% oxygen, and we obviously need plants for that. But remember when I spoke of those eras in history that would have been very inhospitable for humans? Well, those same eras were very hospitable for plants. It's the greenhouse effect. There were once forests and swamps at the geographic North and South Poles, back when the North Pole had land. During that same era that was so wonderful for plants, we wouldn't have lasted. Despite that, the more recent warming that started 12,000 years ago facilitated agriculture and essentially changed the relationship human beings have with plants. And while it's nowhere near as hot as it used to be, that transition from cold to warm greatly helped human beings. So it's understandable to think that warming would be better for us. After all, so many people enjoy the warmer months more than the winter months, so they don't think global warming is a big deal. I've heard some people say that they think it's even a good thing. People come down to Florida from the north during the winter months. We call them snowbirds. But the summer in Florida is a very different story. The heat is getting more extreme and lasting longer. Far fewer people would live in Florida if not for air conditioning. But imagine no reprieve. Imagine if the heat stayed persistent and we became completely reliant on air conditioning, like we're on some sort of foreign planet that requires shelter and special suits to go outside. That's our current trajectory. And that's not even a solution anyway, because it's not like the ecosystem we rely upon is going to get air conditioning. It'll just collapse and take us with it. People like Joe Rogan talk about fear-mongering regarding climate change, like we're exaggerating about it being so deadly. But what he fails to understand is that it has already been very deadly. Not only will warming kill us if it continues, and it will because we've already passed the point of no return, but what it already started is a massive extinction event, the 6th extinction event on this graph, the one that's happening right now. Our shift from a hunting and gathering organism to an agricultural organism was the beginning of total human dominance over the earth, and consequently marked the beginning of the Great Holocene extinction. Yes, this is what it looks like. Not only are you living during an ice age, but you're also living during a massive extinction event, the 6th one that has ever happened. We think of extinction events as an asteroid slamming into the earth in a Hollywood movie and wiping everything out in a single day. But the previous mass extinction events were not like that. Not even the one that was caused by an asteroid. Most of the extinctions are gradual and might not even be noticed in the span of a single lifetime. Make no mistake, though, you are living during a profound transitional period for the planet. Since humans are causing the current global extinction, it's happening extremely rapidly relative to the geological scale. Human beings are as close to the destructive power of an asteroid as it gets. There's around 10 million different species on Earth. The natural background extinction rate is about 1 species per million per year. In other words, the natural extinction rate is about 10 species per year. The current rate is about 30,000 per year. So the number of species we're supposed to lose in a year is what we now lose every 2.5 hours. That's how bad it is. Not how bad it's going to be, not fear-mongering about the future. That's how bad it is right now, as I speak. At the current rate, it would take only about 330 more years to wipe out the entire planet. But that probably won't happen. The rate would taper off, and we'd get wiped out before that because the stability of the ecosystem relies on many of those species, and we rely on the stability of the ecosystem. And even though life probably won't be totally wiped out, it will still take tens of millions of years for life to recover from what we're doing right now. Because organisms evolve over long periods of time, they don't typically adjust well to rapid changes. So please try to comprehend how much we've altered the planet very recently and very quickly. As it stands today, 95% of the Earth's mammalian biomass is composed of humans and livestock. 95% is basically just people and fast food. That's what we turned the planet into. Only 5% is composed of wild animals now. When I was born, wild mammalian animals were at 15%. That's how rapidly we're changing the world. 10% during my 50 years of life. That doesn't even include all the other biomass that exists just to service us, the plants, the poultry, and the fish. Basically, we turned the entire earth into a giant farm and a giant slaughterhouse, but without the sustainability to keep it all running. Despite that, what's very rapid on a geological scale can be almost unnoticeable to us because of our short lifespan of no more than a century. But it will become very noticeable toward the end, sort of like how it's difficult to notice that the sun is moving when it's noon, but very noticeable when the sun is setting. See, that's why foolish people like Joe Rogan and Mel Gibson get to exist and say such foolish things while still feeling confident and correct. They're looking at the sun at noon and scoffing at anyone who says the sun is moving across the sky. So the rate of Earth's change can feel negligible within the span of a single human life, especially when that life was born during the early stages of the rapid change, and especially when that particular human life is comfortably insulated by wealth. But that's very temporary.
Especially when.
We're actually living during an extremely, wildly incongruous point, not just in Earth's history, but in human history as well. We've been around for about 200,000 years, and throughout the vast majority of those years, human beings lived out their entire lives in nature, in the wild, not in big cities or even little towns. There were no factories, there were no farms, nothing changed. People's lives were the exact same as their parents' lives and their ancestors' lives thousands of years before them. We are the anomaly. We've grown to expect change. My belief is that we're eventually going to return to the mean, the norm, back to nature, and inevitably die out. I have no idea how long that will take, but on a geological scale, it'll barely be noticeable that human beings ever existed at all. A tiny blip, not even a single frame of a 3-hour movie. But because we're living during the anomaly, because we are the anomaly, it feels like the only way it's ever been, doesn't it? You were born into it, so it's your world. It's what you know.
We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented.
And then we leave the problems to our kids to solve.
It's very much not what hundreds of thousands of years of human beings have known, and it's definitely not what millions of years of other species have known, but it is what you've known. And that relative tunnel vision affords people like Joe Rogan and Mel Gibson the ability to smugly deny the evidence. It affords them the ability to say that their denial won't affect their own lives. What's so frustrating is that the rate of change is happening at just the right speed for the ignorant to be able to deny and dismiss. As intelligent as human beings are, we're just not intelligent enough as a collective to prevent us from destroying ourselves. So, in a way, you won a morbid sort of lottery. Think of our existence right now as a guy who destroyed his life because he won $100 million in the lottery. Now, his life was fine before the lottery. He just lived a normal, fairly balanced life. But then he won $100 million. And that caused his life to rapidly change. He bought a mansion, sports cars, and started having wild parties with lots of drugs and alcohol. That's where we are right now, though it's hard to see because we forgot what it was like before the party. It still seems fine to us, pretty good and fun, Yet the first signs of overdosing and alcohol poisoning are starting to appear. Still, it's enough for a lot of people at the party to deny. Eventually, though, reality wins, and none of us will be able to deny it, and the party will end after everyone ODs. We would have been fine if we never won the lottery. In other words, if we just stayed hunter-gatherers. People like Elon Musk claim that our greatest threat is population collapse. There are currently 8.3 billion people on Earth, which is double what it was when I was born, meaning half the world is younger than I am. And he thinks we should dramatically increase our numbers. That's because his great wealth and prosperity is based on a system of perpetual growth. But it's that sort of growth that is rapidly destroying our ecosystem and subsequently us. Perpetual growth is not what a healthy, well-balanced organism does. It's what cancer does until it kills you. That's difficult for
There it is.
us to accept, though, because if the economic system we built stops growing, then we perceive it as disastrous, as our investments stop paying us for doing nothing but investing. And if the growth
Oh no, my self-worth.
of money stops, then so too does the quiet theft of inflation. With no replacement for the workforce, companies scramble to automate, and the young are saddled with taking care of the old without compensation, as if that's not what a couple 100,000 years of human beings have always done. But people like Elon Musk have other motives above and beyond the survival of human beings. Notice his pattern. He acts in a way that goes against his stated beliefs. For example, he used to warn of the great dangers of artificial intelligence and supported strong regulations for it.
He was mildly aware, almost, of the exact concept of humans being the cancer. He opened up his 2006 comedy special with a brief introduction saying, "We're here to eat the sandwich," and yet here he is, completely disconnected from that.
But now he's one of its biggest proliferators and actively fights regulating it. In the past, he has expressed what an imminent danger climate change is, but since he more openly aligned himself with the far right, which disregards climate initiatives, he now publicly downplays the danger, encouraging population growth and AI growth, despite both contributing to climate change. So why would someone act in a way that goes against their stated beliefs? Because he's trying to further insulate himself from what he knows is coming. He knows it's too late to stop climate change, so he doesn't care about contributing to it. He needs the economic growth for his resources, and it's
Hot committed.
also why he wants to set up life on the moon and on Mars, as far-fetched as that is. Because there's 8.3 billion people now, and the damage has already been done, there is no call to action in this video. There's nothing you can do. It doesn't matter if you stop driving your truck or turn the temperature on your AC up a couple of degrees. Most of the climate change, anyway, is driven by the industries that created modernity in order to service billions of people.
And they just want to pass the responsibility onto you, the guilt onto you.
That gigantic, gluttonous engine will never stop.
It's not never, because he's right in this fact of reality that this video right here has, 4 views, mine, and no, it has to be a call of unity, and we'd all have to do it. And he's right, it's not going to happen.
Of its own volition, and it's too late, even if it could. The only realistic call to action I could make is that if you care about the truth, as I do, then stop believing ignorant people like Joe Rogan and try to convince other people to stop believing such reckless ignorance as well. That which benefited us so greatly will strangely, ironically, be the cause of our demise. So 12,000 years ago, if we never began agriculture, counterintuitively, human beings probably would have lasted much longer, along with many of the Earth's other species. And if the Earth gradually warmed due to natural changes, just as it has in the past, we
would have adapted.
Probably would have had enough time to adapt and evolve, just like the same conditions that gave rise to the dinosaurs. Instead, we're causing the change unnaturally, very rapidly, with no time to adapt and evolve. We're just going to party until the end. What's so frustrating to me is that we sort of had a chance. There was a window when our best and brightest already knew what we had to do for our one last chance. But at the most crucial point, we handed power to the absolute worst people to hand power to, and they did the exact opposite of what we should have done. Not that the masses would have had the will to do it anyway, because it would have involved hardship. But basically they hit the gas instead of the...
Not even real hardship, perceived hardship that ultimately culminates in flourishing for all.
Break. We fucked up right at the edge of the cliff, and the human race won't get to go on because of it. The Earth has about 1 billion years left to support complex life, which is 2 more of these graphs. And maybe that'll be enough time for another highly intelligent species to arise and do better. Maybe. But it's not going to be us. After all, 99% of all the species that have ever existed on Earth went extinct. So the odds were never in our favor. It's just so disappointing that we couldn't muster more than an eye blink's worth of existence. Not like the dinosaurs. Very dumb creatures by comparison, yet survived millions of years. So maybe our intellect is our undoing. We're smart enough to do amazing things, so we focus all our cognitive power on that and whatever it requires, to the detriment of maintaining balance with our environment, the problems of which happen just slow enough for us to ignore until it's too late.
Too smart for our own good.
Perfect trap for such an intelligent species. So as I close here, I want you to listen carefully. Things are going to get bad. I've already taken some pretty dramatic steps in my own life to prepare for it. I don't know how much time we have, but very smart people who I trust and who know way more about this stuff than I do tell me that it's going to be very soon. In other words, don't expect the 2030s to be a good time. I wish I had a more optimistic outlook for you, but regardless of how frustrating and disappointing it is, you could still look at it another way. Nothing like us has ever existed on Earth before. Just because something lasts for a very short while, that doesn't mean it did not have great value. Because we are the ones who derive that value. I value human life. I think
same here, brother.
We matter because we relate to each other in the here and the now, the present. And that remains true, regardless of what the world is like in 300 years or 1,000,000 years. Yes, all of your work, everything you've done, everything you own, and everyone you know will ultimately be destroyed. But that has nothing to do with why it matters to us in the present, because the present belongs to us. It's where we exist. Everything you enjoy, from meals to movies to video games to books to sports to sex, literally everything is finite, and you would cease to find value in any of those things if they did not end. Even gold would be worthless if everyone had a never-ending supply of it. And so we too must end at some point, or what value would we have?
I know you wanna go, and I don't blame you at
All right, that music definitely cannot make it into it. Yeah. Well, there's that. Thanks so much